I am going to fold clothes and then talk about my 2 C-sections. Okay, so I was gonna use my new camera that I got for my birthday, and it's not formatting and it's not doing whatever, I don't know. So I'm doing it on my phone. So hopefully the sound is okay. Anyway, I think the first thing, obviously, between a unscheduled and a scheduled C-section would be the craziness leading up to it, right? Because with the this is Lucia, unscheduled, I had to be induced, first of all, and I had all these complications. I was in labor for, I don't know, friggin' almost 30 hours. It was a little over 29 hours. As opposed to a scheduled C-section, which I remember I had to be there I had to sign in at 5 a.m. So I woke up at 4. I got dressed. I did my hair. Well, I actually did my hair the night before because I couldn't really sleep. I did my makeup. Not like crazy, but just enough to not look, you know, like a bridge troll. And yeah, and I signed in. I took my time. There was like 2 people ahead of me that were also get there for their C-section, and just the calmest experience. I remember for the first one, the doctor came in and he was like, I know you don't want this. I know you don't, but you need to have one. If I could go back in time, if I could take a time machine, if I could take a time machine, I could go back in time. It's 5T. I would go back into that labor room and be like, Wendy, just take the C-section the first time they mentioned it, because they mentioned the C-section around 6 p.m. of the second day that I had already been induced. I got induced 5 p.m. and I got a C-section the following midnight. He's like, I know you don't want it. I know you don't want to do this, but we got to get that baby out. And I was hesitant, and I just stared at him for a second. And I was like, fine. It's you know, that I was like, baby's heartbeat was going down. I was having all these complications. And I'm like, that's what I gotta do, that's what I gotta do, right? As soon as I said, I'm like, fine. And so then he's like, do you have any questions? And I think the only thing I asked was, do I have to get another needle in my back? Because I had such a bad experience with the epidural. The anesthesiologist was very mean, and he was screaming at me because I don't like people. I don't even like getting massages. I will not go to the chiropractor because I don't like people touching my spine. So when he was touching it, I was like squirming, and he got really mad at me, and he kept screaming at me. He was mad that he had to come back to do it because I guess he had just finished his something and he was on call, and he was like already on his way home, and they had to call him. The nurses told me all this gossip, and so I think he was just in a really bad mood because of it. This is a 3T. Yeah, this isn't there yet. So he was just in a bad mood. He was not nice, so I had a very bad experience with my epidural, and so that was the only thing. I'm like, I don't have to get anything in my back, right? Another needle. They're like, no, it just changed the medicine, right? That's in the bag. So as soon as I say yes, he runs out, and I do mean run, like not power walked. He ran out, and then he had come in with like, I don't know, 6 or 7 other medical professionals, which I later learned were nurses and surgical techs and the anesthesiologist. They all like rush me, and they all start moving stuff around, and moving me around, and the anesthesiologist changing the bag, and one of the nurses goes up to my husband. She's like, okay, this is what's gonna happen. We're gonna do this, and you're gonna go over here, and we're gonna change that, and you're gonna do this other thing, and it's just going and going and going, and then they take me out of the room, and I don't know, God, it's so fast. That's the last thing I remember. A nurse taking out my husband, and then eventually I'm out, and I'm also like being talked to they're like taking turns, but they're talking fast, and like one of them's holding a release form for this, and a sign this, and a sign this other thing, take this, and I'm like, oh my God. So I'm like taking all this stuff and like trying to sign this, and they're like moving me. They tried to do it as much as I could while I was in the room, but there were some things they were like explaining things to me as we were walking into the OR, right to the operating room. And I remember one of the things they told me, I don't remember a lot, too much, I do remember one of the biggest things was we're most likely going to take the baby to the NICU. As soon as they take the baby out, it's probably going to go to the NICU, so don't expect the baby until a few hours because we got to monitor. Baby's heartbeat has been really low for a really long time. And I remember that because I remember when they were taking her out, how scared I was. I'll get to that, hold on. Anyway, we get into the OR, they're cleaning me, they're moving stuff, and everyone's running back and forth. And then my husband comes, they bring in my husband, he comes in really fast, he sits, and then that's when the surgeons come in, and he's like, all right, let's go. And they put the thing up, and all I can hear is like, okay, do this, and then move this, and then over here, and then go over here, and how many is this, and how many of that, and something cubits of this. And all the while I can hear everybody like kind of communicating to each other, and I can hear the anesthesiologist on this side, and he's like, okay, you're gonna feel it. It's not gonna hurt, but you're gonna feel it. It's gonna be moving around, it's gonna be just tossing and pulling, but it's okay. If you feel pain, then you tell me. And it was weird. It was the weirdest feeling, because with that one I had the epidural, and I could feel when they were tugging and pulling and poking and grabbing, and I had no pain, but I could feel when, obviously when they push down to push the baby. And then I remember them like having to like tug multiple times inside of it. I could feel pressure going into my stomach when they put their hands in. And then he tugged like 3 times, and I go, oh wow, she's really stuck because her head had gotten stuck. I think like the top part or like the side part of her head was stuck in the cervix. I could tell that that's what they were doing. Like I could feel, it was weird. They finally take her out because they told me they were gonna have to take her to the NICU. Unless she cries, then maybe, she'll be okay. We'll examine her in here instead of the NICU. And she comes out screaming like a banshee. And I was like, oh, thank God. I'm like, thank you, Jesus, right? Because I was so afraid that because at that point I was like, I screwed up. When I heard like, hey, her heartbeat's been low for a long time. She's been low amniotic fluid. I had gotten an infection from the meconium that was inside. It was intense. And it was then when I realized how fast everybody was moving and telling me that they had to take the baby to the NICU, that I'm like, I screwed up. I should have just trusted them, I don't know, 6-7 hours ago when they first told me to get a C-section. Too little too late. Anyway, this is not Valentina's, no, this is Lucia's. And so, they pull her out, she's wailing, she's crying at the top of her lungs, and I'm so grateful, I'm so thankful. They kind of pull her over to the other side of the curtain. She was a big baby, but she just had rolls and rolls, and she was so fat, and I loved it. It was so cute. Anyway, then they kind of show her to me right like this, and then they take her like away, like out of because they're, trying to establish to see if she got an infection, if she was okay, if she had a fever and all this stuff. So they do that. My husband goes, I tell him, he's like, I'm gonna stay with you. I'm like, no, go with the baby, go check on the baby, let me know if she's okay, see if she's okay. And after they're like, yep, everything's healthy, she's perfectly fine, I was like, oh, thank God. And then they bring her over to me, and they lay her like, I don't know, like this is her face, and so they lay her like this over my face, and so then I kiss her cheek, and she goes, and then she's like trying to like nurse on my face. She was trying to eat my face. It was the cutest thing ever. And so I'm like, oh, she woke up hungry, and they're like, oh, that's a good sign too. That's, she's ready to nurse and all this stuff. So then as they're closing me up, they are still like business, all business. They're like, how many of this and how many of this other thing, and check this other thing, go over here. And I mean, it didn't like it lightened up a little bit because the baby came out safe, but they were still like, oh my God, we have to do this and we have to do this other thing. And you can hear them just talking just straight business. And I didn't think much about it at the time. So I'm like, oh, whatever, they're just doing their jobs, until I had my second C-section. So with the second C-section, I had planned for a VBAC. I really wanted to experience, a birth, and I was even practicing hypnobirthing and all this stuff so that I can do it naturally. I did not have a very good experience the first time around, and I wanted to change that narrative for me, because the closer I got to birthing, the more nervous I got, because all I had were bad experiences from it. Like, I loved the nurses, I loved the staff. I had a really nice room. I ended up, the hospital I was originally supposed to labor in was packed. I guess everyone decided to have their baby that weekend, or all the babies decided to come that weekend, and I had to be moved to another hospital, which worked out for the better, because that hospital was brand new. It had only been open for like 2 years or something like that, so everything was like state of the art, whatever. But it was just the experience itself, all of the complications that was, I don't like to use the word traumatizing, but well, that's what it was, right? Because I was getting more and more fearful of birthing, and hoping that everything would come out, turn out well. Didn't go into labor again. I never started labor. I went up to, it was 41 weeks. He said, we can wait until 41 weeks, see if you go into labor naturally. If you don't want a C-section, we can use other drugs other than Pitocin, but we do not recommend Pitocin. I speak about this in depth in my video diaries, but just quickly. But we can use other drugs, but I think if you had all those same complications, they may happen again. I did end up just scheduling it, hoping that I would go into labor before my 41 weeks, but that didn't really happen. So I guess I'm getting a C-section today. So I get dressed. I was supposed to be there at 5 a.m. or check in at 5 a.m. Woke up at 4. But with the first one, a month later, almost exactly, because she was born on August 1st, on August like 3rd or 4th, I start bleeding, like just complete full-on hemorrhage, and I had to go back in. I got examined. It was RPOC, remaining products of conception, which was basically pieces of placenta that my body was trying to get, released by my body. So I had to go back and get a, I don't know, a D&E, I forgot what it's called, to get the remaining products and stuff out of my body. So that was fun. And so I'm going back into the C-section. Had to be there at 5 a.m. and I'm just nervous, but it was really calm. It was empty. And yeah, I sign in, I sign some paperwork, I go in, they're like, okay, come over to your room. They take me to my room, and I'm in triage at the moment, and I can hear the women all over in different rooms laboring and wailing, and a part of me, like I felt my heart break, because I really, really did want to labor. And I don't know if that sounds weird. I don't think it's weird. I didn't want to have another C-section. That recovery is really, it's hard, it's rough. And like, God, it was hard recovering with a newborn. I'm gonna have a toddler and a newborn after major abdominal surgery, and I really wanted to experience delivering a child the way nature intended. And so I could hear them laboring in other rooms and walking past my room, kind of, I guess, them trying to like ease their pain. And I just sat there waiting in a hospital gown, as like every 15 minutes or so somebody would be coming, like, how are you, how did you sleep, here's this paperwork, go ahead and sign it, it just says this, take your time, I'll be back in 5 minutes so I can give you some time to read it. And all the while the women around me are all wailing in pain from their labor. And then also to there was paperwork, but there was also like medicine. They're like, okay, so this is for this, you might want to take this other thing, and okay, someone else will be with you in a moment, you could just go ahead and take a break. If you want to take a nap, go ahead. So in between, sometimes I take a nap, because I did not sleep the night before. I was so nervous. And then my surgery was scheduled for 7 a.m., but I guess they were running a little late. And at one point, my doctor came in and he kind of talked me through it and what's going to happen. He's like, you've done this before, and all this stuff. And then he was signing me in. We were signing paperwork on the like little iPad thing, and we were just like small talking. He was like talking to my husband for a second about, I don't know, I wasn't fully paying attention. They were talking and just small talk, and it was just so different, right? Everybody was calm. And then the one I remember the most was the anesthesiologist. That interaction I remember the most because I was like, listen, I had a really bad experience with my epidural. I was very squirmy. He was yelling at me. It was rough. He was very aggressive. He was just not, I didn't like him. So I was just telling him that, and I was like, and I asked him some questions. I'm like, I'm really nervous about what happens if I feel, right? What if it doesn't work? Anyway, so it was so funny. When I asked him about the squirming, he's like, well, I specialize in squirming, so you're in good hands. And he told me like what would happen if I feel something, if it doesn't work, or if something goes wrong. Everything, like he stayed and he answered all my questions, and it was really great, and he was really sweet, and I'm really grateful for him. And then after a while, they ran a little late because I was scheduled for 7, and they came for me around 7:20, 7:15. By the time they started the operation, it was like 7:30. Anyway, so they come in, they're like, okay, so we're gonna go over to the operating room. Would you like a wheelchair or do you want to walk? I'm like, I'm gonna walk, because this is, in my head, I'm like, because this is the last time in a while that I'm going to walk normally, and I'm going to enjoy walking without pain. So I'm like, no, I'll walk. So I walked myself to the OR, and I sat up on the operating table, and then I went and I hugged the nurse. You know, they come and they hold you. Anesthesiologist comes in. He walks me through it. He's like, remember this, the first 5 minutes is gonna suck, but it's the first needle. All it does is numb you, and then when the big needle comes in, you're already numb. It's not gonna hurt. All you're gonna feel is pressure. So then he's like, okay, you ready? This is the part that sucks, but it's only 5 seconds. Ready? And he counts down from 5. He's like, 5, 4, and I'm all like, you know, holding on to the nurse, and he does that, and he's like, okay, that's the worst part. Are you ready for the next part? And he's like, you're gonna feel pressure. You're gonna feel it in your feet first, and and he's explaining everything, exactly how it's gonna feel. And he's like, don't be weirded out, because this is what's gonna happen next. And then I guess I started to clench up at one point when he was doing the bigger needle, because the spinal block goes actually into your spine, as opposed to the epidural is on the outsides. No, relax. And I could feel like the nurse just like shh me, like shushing me and like calming me down. And he's like, push back. And he's like, bend. He's like, kind of like curve your spine and push towards me, push that needle. And so he's like coaching me through the whole thing, and being so sweet and so kind. And oh my God, he was the best. And he's like, all right, all done. That's it. Oh, you did great. Now it's time to welcome in your baby, right? He was so sweet. And so then I'm like hugging, and as soon as I go like this to lay down, like my legs just, I was like, oh, I feel it, and I was starting to like collapse. And so then the nurses kind of helped me lay down a little bit better, and then they lay me down, and then I'm just kind of laying there for a second. They're just kind of taking their time, washing stuff, setting up equipment, and they put like the sterilizer on my belly, and she's like, we're gonna leave this there for like, I don't know, 3-4 minutes, let it do its work, and then we'll come right back and wipe it off. And they're just so calm. Then the doctor comes in, a surgeon, and he starts talking about, he starts running, you know, patient's name and doing all the checks and making sure everything's, you know, right and stuff like that. So, hold on. So they put the curtain up, and he's like, okay, let's get the husband in here. And so then my husband comes in, and he's sitting there, and then that's when I hear them start talking, like the surgeons are talking to each other. And I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? And you know, the trauma, I guess we can call it, of like, oh God, what's happening? What's going on? What are they saying? And they're talking about work, right? Just nothing in particular, just having a conversation and starting and going on and doing their thing. And I was like, oh, they're not worried. They're just like sitting there not gossiping, but like just sitting there having this like random conversation like this. It felt so normal. And so it really calmed me down knowing that they felt comfortable and almost like routine, and it's just like, yeah, it's just another day, we're just doing another C-section, and they were just kind of doing their thing. And when I heard them just talking about work and just doing their own thing, it calmed my nerves a lot, and I was like, oh, okay, they're good, they're Gucci, I'm good. And so then I turned over to my husband. Then we started just kind of talking about stuff. The doctor, he came in before he started doing his checks. I remember he came up to me as I'm laying there. You ready? You excited? And I was like, I wasn't ready or excited. I was very nervous. I was just very calm. And then by the time the baby was gonna come, we were gonna pull the baby out. And like every now and then the anesthesiologist assistant, she was like next to me running the stuff, and then he was on the other side of the curtain, I guess watching this is Valentina's, I guess watching the surgery. I don't really know what he was doing on that side. And he goes, he would come over every now and then and, okay, now the baby's gonna come out and you're gonna feel that pressure on your stomach and on your chest, and it's gonna feel like an elephant sitting on there. And it was very different because with the first, I told you, I felt so much. Like, it didn't hurt, but I did feel a lot of what was going on and where they were, how they were doing it, you know. With this one, I felt like pulling, but it was like numb. And then even when they took the baby out, I did feel the pressure, but I didn't feel the hands going in. I didn't feel the tugging. I didn't feel like being jostled around. So that was different. I guess the spinal block is stronger, and I don't really know how that works. Unlike the first one, they put down the curtain and they held her over the curtain so I could see her. So I saw her when she was like first out, and it was really sweet. I wanted to grab her. Oh my gosh. I was good about not grabbing her, but like I just remember that the first one, I was strapped down, and it was freezing, and I was shaking the whole time. I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't stop shaking. With this one, they put socks on me, and they put like warm blankets on like my lower half and like the upper half. I was not strapped down. I had the freedom to like, you know, they just held her there for a long time. They didn't like try to run. It wasn't like with Lucia where they just like, here's your baby, and then they like, we gotta go check to make sure she's not, you know, unwell. They just let me, I just looked at her for a long time, and I examined her, and I noticed different things about her features. She had like it was like a little pimple on the tip of her nose, and she had like the birthmark on her leg, and I noticed a lot of things. That she was she came up darker than Lucia. Now they're about the same like skin tone, but like at the time she looked like her skin was darker, and I noticed all this stuff, and I noticed all this dark hair that I didn't notice the first time. It gave me time to just sit there and just look at her, and it was really nice. I love that they did that. They were close enough to me. They're like right next to me with Valentina, where I could see her and watch her, and they were doing all this stuff with Lucia. It was so far that I couldn't like I could barely see them in my peripheral when I looked back. The post-op was about the same. And the hospital stay was about the same, but yeah, everything just felt calmer. Okay. Part of me still wishes I would have been able to experience birth, but after the first time, when I felt that I had really put the baby at risk, like I felt like I made a decision. Oh, she's screaming at the TV. I promised myself, and I remember looking at the baby and promising to myself that I would never do that again. That if there was some complication and they were saying like, hey, you should probably get a C-section because it's not safe, that I'd just go with it. And that's what I ended up having the second time there. So I'm like, I'm gonna try to see if I can labor, to see if I go into labor. I did everything. I did all of the things, all of the stuff to try to go into labor, and it didn't work. And so I'm like, the last thing I want is to be induced again. I couldn't. They weren't gonna do Pitocin again. Too harsh, they said, and it could like cause oh god, I forgot, a uterine rupture. Yeah, I'm like, it's just not worth it. I'm not getting induced again. It's either go into labor naturally or just go straight to a scheduled C-section. It was a good call because Valentina ended up being even bigger than Lucia. Lucia was born at 8'1", and Valentina was born at 8'12". She was almost a 9-pound baby. I don't know how I gave birth to such large babies, but I did. They all very much made sure they let me know that that was a very large baby for a very small person. Even though I didn't want a C-section, I really didn't want to get induced again. So I was like, because the first time around, I was not physically, emotionally, or mentally ready to recover from a C-section. Like, I struggled so much, and so having that information and going into it the second time was a world of a difference, and being able to recover faster. Yeah, well, I also didn't have complications post-surgery, like a month afterwards, you know. I still had like half of this bag of clothes to fold, so. I've been out of the YouTube game for a while, so I'm trying to get back in and restart my channel. I don't really know what to do, and I feel weird speaking to a camera again. I actually went into this channel's like YouTube studio, and there's a few comments left on an old video that I just never checked. It's like 3 years ago, and I felt so bad. I'm like, oh crap, I never responded to any of these comments, and I felt really bad. But like once the baby was born, like I said, there was all this stuff that was going on, and I wasn't physically or mentally prepared to like get any of this done. Before my first daughter even turned 2, I came home with like a newborn from another C-section, and it's just been kind of crazy. This summer, actually, in a couple weeks, I think 2 weeks, Valentina, my second daughter, she is turning 2, and then a month and a half from now, Lucia, my older daughter, she's turning 4. So, and it's now starting to like mellow out, where I feel like I want to do something with my time. And so yeah, I don't know.